showing up with that vulnerability to your team does not make you look weak. For many leaders, there's this unspoken rule that says if I show emotion or if I show uncertainty, then people will lose respect for me. When in fact, is the opposite is true. When you're honest, when you're approachable and show up as a human, people are willing to trust you more. Hey, and welcome back to another episode of Give Yourself Some Leeway with me, your host, Eugene Lee. Today's episode is for leaders. Now, I've been fortunate enough to have so many great guests talk about leadership, including Jimmy Burrows, David Hatch, and Dan Roberts. So this episode is dedicated to those who want to be leaders or are in leadership roles. Now, being a leader is not just about being a job title. It's being a leader both at work, being a leader at home, a leader on your sports team, or showing up as a leader somewhere in your community. There's something that often gets left unseen or unspoken of in leadership, and that's the empathy gap. Why so many leaders care deeply about their teams, what they do, yet they still leave people feeling unseen, unheard, and alone. And the most important thing we can do is recognize this empathy gap and what to do about it. Now, you've probably seen this play out in the workplace. You have the meeting, the boss says, "Hey, if you have any problems, my door is open." Everyone smiles, nods, but then behind the boss's back, they're like, "Well, there's no point in sharing anything with them. Nothing changes anyway." That's an empathy gap. It's not a lack of caring from the leader, but it's a gap between what the leaders intend and how the people feel. Now, on paper, the numbers may look fine, might be meeting KPIs, performance metrics, everything looks good. But behind the scenes, people feel disconnected from the work. They're burnt out, they're quiet quitting, or they're actively preparing to leave. Modern leadership, as we know it, is running on old software. And it's time for a reboot by reconnecting with our humanity. So a while back, had a very similar issue to this with it with the team. Senior leader came to me. Let's let's call her Emma. And she said that, "Look, I don't get it. I'm paying the team well. I'm giving them their bonuses. We're cutting out all of these extra team meetings so that they can get their work done, but it still feels like my team is disengaged." And on paper, she was doing everything right. She was doing leadership by the book. But when we got feedback from her team, they said it was a bit different. They said, "Look, she's smart and she's fair about what she does, but she's not really with us. Yes, she might be following leadership by the book, but we feel like she doesn't understand what we're doing, what it's like to be on the front lines." So that's the empathy gap in action. Emma cared, and she was doing leadership by the book the way it was taught, but her team didn't feel that in return. They didn't feel like she cared. So there was no villain in this story. It was just a disconnect between what the leader had intended and how the team perceived how she was showing up. So that's what an empathy gap is. It's the space in between intention and perception. While the leader can intend to support the team might perceive that as being pressured, distance, or maybe indifference. A lot of this can come from how modern leadership is being trained. For years, leaders are being told what to focus on are the KPIs, meeting the performance metrics, having an efficient team, focusing on how much output you can get from your team. Tracking the numbers is important. All of that does matter, but when the numbers become everything, when they become the sole focus, the basic human needs of the team can slide into the background. And when they get neglected, The cost is very real. You see a high turnover, less innovation and creativity because no one's going to speak up because nothing changes anyway. You see more burnout, cases of quiet quitting, and people just feel isolated and disconnected at work. This can be seen as well in remote and hybrid teams, where the gap can get even wider because you don't bump into people in the hallway. You can't see how they're really doing. You don't see how tired they might be after a long day of work. And everything can get filtered through online meetings, on Teams meetings, how they reply to emails, and what appears on a dashboard. That can all be filtered through that you cannot see how a person is really doing in their job. Not about the metrics, not about their performance, but how do they really feel? And when people don't feel seen in the work that they do, they're not going to show up at their best. Not because they're being lazy about it, but because connecting with the work that you do and connecting with the people you work with, that's where the fuel to do a great job lies. If you feel disconnected, that's like cutting a fuel line. So, what's the alternative? What can we do to rehumanize leadership? I like to phrase it as moving from transactional leadership into transformational leadership. So, transactional leadership, it says, I give you a task and you give me the result. It's very tit for tat. Transformational leadership, on the other hand, which is a much more human approach, is saying, as a team, we're in this together. We have a shared purpose and a shared outcome. And your growth in this role matters as much as reaching that goal. That shift simply shows up as rather than saying, are you going to meet that deadline? That deadline's coming up on Friday. How are we? Are we on track? And showing up and saying, how are you doing this week? I know we have a deadline coming up. How are you feeling about that? Are we on track? Do you need any support? And rather than saying like, oh, on a scale of 1 to 10, like very survey approach being like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how supported do you feel? That's very, I mean, I would stonewall if my manager said that to me. How about you show up and say, look, what support would you like? Or what would support look like to you right now? What would support look like to you right now? Much less likely to stonewall. It might even just be a hypothetical. What would support look like? If you needed support right now, what would that support look like? Empathy doesn't mean that as a leader you need to have answers all the time. It means that you're just willing to listen. It means that you can sit with the discomfort. You can say, look, I don't fully understand how you're feeling right now, but I want to understand. Help me see what you're going through. And yes, showing up like that requires a lot of vulnerability. It can be raw, it can be uncomfortable, but showing up with that vulnerability to your team does not make you look weak. For many leaders, there's this unspoken rule that says if I show emotion or if I show uncertainty, then people will lose respect for me. When in fact, is the opposite is true. When you're honest, when you're approachable and show up as a human, people are willing to trust you more. If you show up as a human and are relatable and can connect with them, they'll follow you not just because they have to, because that's your role as a leader, but because they want to. They want to connect with you and follow you as a leader. So, what can you do? If you want to cultivate connection between you as a leader, showing that your intention is to care and see the team prosper, and help them to understand that. How can you cultivate that connection? Here are a few simple steps. This is a place where you can start. So think about for the next 2 weeks. Pick one person every day to check in with and just show intention rather than just saying like, "Oh, do you have any updates for me?" Try saying, "What's one thing that we could do to make this week easier?" Or what's on your mind today? What's any challenges you're going through? And just be open. When they are giving you their feedback or when they're replying, don't jump to conclusions, don't get defensive, and don't try to figure out a solution for them straight away. Take some time to listen. Just be an open ear. Listen to what they have to say because sometimes you giving them that space, that can be the most powerful thing that they need right now. Offering your presence, listening to what they have to say, and just be as open as saying, "Look, I don't have all the answers for you right now. I'm here to listen to what you have to say, but we can work on moving forward together. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your feedback, and let's see how we can move forward with this." Rather than on the spot trying to think of a solution, because that can make someone stonewall also if they feel that they need to have an answer right now and that you are forcing an answer on them straight away. Be open to having this just open dialogue. And also understanding that people need different kinds of support. Not everyone is going to open up straight away. It might take some time. So when you're reaching out to your team for feedback, try asking them directly how they would prefer to receive feedback from you and how they would prefer to give feedback to you. What is the best channel? Would you prefer if they approached you first, or if you organized a meeting, an intentional meeting to have a coffee with them for 10 or 20 minutes once a week or once a month, whatever works best on their schedule? A big thing for leaders is creating a space for psychological safety. Psychological safety is like a buzzword at the moment in leadership. Creating that psychological safety means that you're creating a space where people feel safe to speak up without the fear of being punished or being judged for what they have to say. That's a big thing. If you want to encourage innovation and creativity in your team, you're going to want to help them feel like they have psychological safety while speaking one on one with a personal check in or in the team meeting. Now, you can build this by thanking people when they do raise their concerns, not shutting them down, thanking them for sharing their concern and listening with an open ear. If you don't know something, admit it. If you keep on trying to cover up for things you don't know, people see straight through that. And that makes you less approachable. Because if they think you're going to stonewall every time they share something, and you feel, "Oh, I shouldn't show uncertainty, or I shouldn't show that I'm not aware of this topic." If you're open and admit that this is something that you were ignorant of, or uncertain of, or didn't even realize was an issue, that will make you so much more approachable that you can say, "Oh, look, I didn't realize this was an issue, but let me look into it." And own your mistakes first. If you start playing the blaming and naming and shaming game, then no one's going to want to open up and tell you the truth about things. I've seen people covering up even the smallest of things that would snowball over time, just because they don't want to look bad. Whereas if they were upfront about it when it was still a tiny issue and it could have been fixed within the next 2 or 3 weeks, it would have been sorted. It would not have affected their ego. When leaders model honesty, then their team is going to reflect that. The team is going to learn that it's okay to be human. It- so if you're a leader and you're struggling with building that connection in the first place, or maybe you've had strong intentions of building that connection and it just hasn't really been hitting home for your team, and they're perceiving it as, oh, you're pressuring them into a situation. What are small ways that you can reintroduce that connection, cultivate that connection within your team? So I've been reading Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg, and it's all about starting small. Start with one thing intentionally, and you can always stack on it in time. So when you start your weekly meeting, rather than running through the agenda, start with a like an invitational question. So start with, okay, we're starting off this week. Are there any wins or struggles from last week that you want to share with the team? I'll start first. If you're having a weekly roundup meeting, start with a reflection like, okay, we're closing out this week. What did we learn from this week? What are some takeaways we can take from this week going forward? Maybe they're key learnings, successes, as we said, and or struggles, something that where someone has made a mistake, and how can we learn going forward to help prevent that? Having these small moments throughout the week, be it in your your agenda meeting or in your weekly wrap up, it shows that everyone in the team is not just a role. It makes them feel like they're also a person, that they're valued as a person in the team. Now, to wrap all of this up, what does empathetic leadership really mean? What does it mean to show up as a human, as a transformational leader, rather than being very transactional and being like, okay, you're on my team, you do the work for me, I give you the task, you do the task, I'll reward you with even more work if you do the first task. What can you do to reconnect with your team as a human? Being an empathetic leader, showing up and connecting with others, it has to stop being seen as a soft skill, something to add to your LinkedIn or to your resume as, oh yeah, I can show empathy to my team. It's not just a box we tick. Showing empathy is a core strategy in your leadership if you wish for long-term success. If you lead a team with empathy, if you can close that empathy gap, team members are going to stay longer. They're going to create more. They're going to speak up more about what can change and how they can help, what problems they can solve, what they can bring to the table, how they can collaborate better with others, and how to bounce back, how to be more resilient and adaptable because they're willing to speak up about what challenges them before it snowballs into something bigger. It helps people to bounce back faster. Leaders who practice empathy don't just help to build better businesses. They build better teams by building better people and also building themselves. So if you're a leader or you want to be one, here's my action step for you this week. I want you to take a moment to reflect because leadership starts with you. It starts with you before you can influence others. How can you show up for others if you don't first show up for yourself? I want you to reflect on this one question. What's one small change that you can make this week to listen deeper, ask better questions, or simply slow down and see the person who's sitting in front of you? How can you show up and be unapologetically human? When you show up with empathy, you don't lose authority. You don't lose credibility. What you do is you gain loyalty. You unlock creativity by having people speak up and wanting to collaborate with you. And you create spaces where people have that psychological safety, where people feel like they can do great work without feeling the fear of being judged or of being shamed or the fear of failing. You create spaces where people can do that great work without losing themselves in the process. So thank you so much for tuning in today. If you want a synopsis or a TLDR version summary of any of these episodes, just send me an email with the episode number and leeway, and I can send those notes to you. You can email me at eugene@leeway.ie. Until next week, take care.